But even all this is not the end of the Son's story. For the whole Bible looks forward to the Son's return to this earth at the end of time. It's not a tiny truth tucked away in half a verse here and there. It's a major thread of hope that is weaved throughout the whole of the Scriptures. It's the hope of the Old Testament. The biblical saga of hope and covenant promise began when God called Abraham to leave his family home. And what started as a purposeful journey for a small group of nomads became a pilgrimage through history of a people packed with divine hope. All biblical hope is based on God's covenant promise in Genesis 12, verses 1 to 3. Here it says, "Now the Lord had said to Abraham, 'Get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you.'" Through this, God guaranteed to provide Abraham and his descendants with a land, a great nation, and a blessing. And it's this threefold promise which is repeated and extended many times throughout the Bible. And it's summarized, I think, best by a phrase which is first mentioned in Genesis chapter 17 and verse 7, where God says, "And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you in their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and your descendants after you." This covenant relationship sums up God's purpose for the whole of humanity. Throughout the Old Testament, Abraham's descendants looked back to these covenant promises and claimed them as their destiny. When they were weak, enslaved, and exiled, the promises enabled them to sustain a national identity and to believe that God had a future and a hope for them. When they were strong and prosperous, the promises helped them maintain a forward view, which was necessary for this hope to be kept alive. The children of Abraham knew that Yahweh was a God of promise, and this knowledge helped them to recognize that the present situation was never God's final act, and they had to fix their eyes and their hopes upon the future and God's complete fulfillment of this promise to Abraham. In the prophets, we find a message of hope. It was the prophets' calling to declare God's intentions about the future, part of it anyway. Most of the prophets whose books are included in the Old Testament ministered when Israel had begun to focus too much on the past. People were looking back to the Exodus from Egypt, back to David's reign, back to the first temple, and so on. But after almost 800 years before Christ, Amos proclaimed that the most important event for God's people still lay in the future, not in the past. He called it the day of the Lord. Amos chapter 5, verses 18 to 20. "Woe to you who desire the day of the Lord, for what good is the day of the Lord to you? It will be darkness and not light. It will be as though a man has fled from a lion and a bear met him, or as though he went into a house, leaned his hand on the wall, and a serpent bit him. Is not the day of the Lord darkness and not light? Is it not very dark with no brightness in it?" Now this was astonishing because it was a time of national prosperity when this catastrophe was announced by Amos. Other prophets preached in much the same way. And through these and many other passages, the prophets mocked Jewish attempts to find security and hope in anything other than God himself.